Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the empty halls of New Geneva Colony's main research building. Her footsteps echoed in the quiet corridors as she made her way to the morning briefing. 2 years had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Coalition, and life on the frontier colonies was still strange. Alien ships came and went regularly now, bringing new technology and opportunities that seemed too good to be true. Sarah stopped at the large window overlooking the colony's central plaza. Children played in the gardens below while their parents worked in the nearby buildings. The sight always made her smile. New Geneva was one of humanity's newest settlements, built specifically to house families who wanted to be part of the galactic community. These children would grow up knowing aliens as neighbors, something Sarah's generation could never have imagined. The briefing room buzzed with quiet conversation when Sarah entered. Colony Administrator James Morrison stood at the front, his usual worried expression even deeper than normal. Next to him stood 3 tall, pale beings that Sarah recognized as Zaphirians. Their large black eyes seemed to take in everything at once, and their thin mouths never seemed to move when they spoke through their translation devices. "Good morning, everyone," Morrison began. "I'd like you to meet Ambassador Kepler and his research team. They've come with an exciting proposal from the Zaphirian Empire." The lead Zaphirian stepped forward. His voice came through the translator in flat, emotionless tones. "We wish to establish cultural exchange programs with your colony. Our species has great interest in human development patterns, particularly in your young ones." Sarah felt something cold move down her spine. The way the alien said young ones made her uncomfortable, though she couldn't explain why. She raised her hand. "What kind of development patterns?" she asked, Kepler's large eyes fixed on her. "Human neural development during growth phases shows unique characteristics. We wish to study how your species learns and adapts. This knowledge could benefit both our peoples." Morrison nodded enthusiastically. "The Coalition Council has already approved this program. It's a great honor that such an advanced species wants to learn from us." The meeting continued for another hour. The Zaphirians explained their plan to set up research stations throughout the colony. They wanted to observe human children in schools, playgrounds, and homes. They promised to share their advanced technology in exchange for this access. Most of the colonists seemed excited about the opportunity. The Zaphirians were known throughout the galaxy for their incredible scientific achievements. Their medicine could cure diseases that killed humans, and their computers were centuries ahead of Earth's technology. Having them choose New Geneva for their research felt like winning a cosmic lottery, but Sarah couldn't shake her unease. She watched the Zaphirians as they spoke with other colonists after the meeting. They asked detailed questions about the colony's children. How many lived here? What were their ages? Where did they spend most of their time? The questions seemed innocent enough, but something about the way they asked made Sarah's skin crawl. Over the next few days, Sarah watched the Zaphirians set up their equipment throughout the colony. They placed small devices in the schools that they claimed would monitor air quality and learning environments. Similar devices appeared in the playgrounds and community centers. When Sarah asked about them, Kepler explained they were simply gathering baseline data about human living conditions. The children seemed fascinated by the aliens. The Zaphirians were patient with their questions and even played simple games with them. Sarah had to admit they appeared genuinely interested in understanding human culture. Maybe her worries were unfounded. On the 5th day, Sarah was reviewing biological samples in her lab when her colleague Dr. Martinez burst through the door. "Sarah, you need to see this," he said, his face pale. He led her to his computer and pulled up readings from the colony's medical sensors. "I was running routine scans when I noticed something odd. Look at these neural activity readings from the school." Sarah stared at the data. The readings showed unusual spikes in brain activity among the children, but only when the Zaphirian devices were active. The patterns were unlike anything she'd seen before. "This doesn't look like normal monitoring equipment," Sarah said. "It looks like something is actively scanning the children's brains." Martinez nodded grimly. "That's what I thought too. I tried to run more detailed scans, but something is blocking my equipment. Whatever those devices are really doing, the Zaphirians don't want us to know about it." That evening, Sarah decided to investigate on her own. She waited until the colony settled into its nighttime routine, then made her way to the central school building. The Zaphirian devices hummed softly in the empty classrooms, their blue lights pulsing in steady rhythms. Sarah pulled out her portable scanner and tried to analyze the alien equipment. The readings made her blood run cold. The devices weren't just monitoring the children. They were actively probing their neural patterns, mapping brain structures and recording detailed scans of developing minds. She heard footsteps in the corridor and quickly hid behind a desk. Through the classroom window, she saw two Zaphirians walking through the school. They moved from room to room, checking their equipment and downloading data to small storage devices. Sarah held her breath as they entered her classroom. The aliens moved with purpose, clearly familiar with their routine. One of them spoke in their own language, not bothering with the translator. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but their tone seemed satisfied, almost pleased. After they left, Sarah waited another hour before slipping out of the school. Her mind raced as she walked home. The Zaphirians weren't studying human culture or learning environments. They were scanning children's brains for reasons they weren't sharing with the colony. Back in her apartment, Sarah tried to contact Earth's government through secure channels. The communication delay to Earth meant she wouldn't get a response for hours, but she needed to report what she'd discovered. As she typed her message, she realized how little proof she had. The Zaphirians could easily claim their devices were standard monitoring equipment. And who would believe a small-town scientist over representatives of one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations? The next morning brought a surprise visit from Ambassador Kepler himself. He arrived at Sarah's lab with two other Zaphirians and Morrison in tow. "Dr. Chen," Morrison said, looking uncomfortable. "Ambassador Kepler would like to speak with you about your research." The alien's black eyes seemed to look right through her. "We understand you have been curious about our equipment. This is natural human behavior. But we must ask that you refrain from interfering with our work." Sarah tried to keep her voice steady. "I was just trying to understand how your monitoring systems work. As the colony's chief scientist, I thought it would be helpful to know what data you're collecting." "Our methods are quite advanced," Kepler replied. "Your technology is not capable of properly interpreting our scans. Attempting to analyze our equipment could damage it or provide false readings." It wasn't exactly a threat, but Sarah heard the warning clearly. Stay away from their devices or there would be consequences. That night, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't prove what the Zaphirians were really doing, not yet, but she could start gathering evidence. If her suspicions were right, the children of New Geneva were in danger, and no one else seemed willing to protect them. She began planning her investigation, not knowing that her actions would soon expose a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of the Galactic Coalition. The Zaphirians had made a critical error in choosing to target human children. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. Sarah spent the next week carefully watching the Zaphirians. She noticed they followed specific patterns, visiting the schools and playgrounds at the same times each day. They seemed most interested in children between the ages of 8 and 14, always carrying small scanning devices when they interacted with them. Her opportunity came during the colony's weekly maintenance cycle. While the main power grid was being serviced, Sarah slipped into the central school building. She had only 30 minutes before the backup generators would restore full power to the Zaphirian monitoring systems. Working quickly, Sarah connected her modified scanner to one of the alien devices. The initial readings confused her. The equipment was far more sophisticated than anything humans had developed, but its purpose was becoming clear. The device wasn't just scanning brain activity. It was mapping specific neural pathways and recording detailed patterns of how young human minds processed information. She downloaded as much data as possible before the power came back online. Back in her lab, Sarah spent hours analyzing what she'd found. The results made her sick to her stomach. The Zaphirians were creating detailed maps of children's developing brains, focusing specifically on areas related to creativity, problem solving, and emotional processing. But why would they need such detailed scans? Sarah dug deeper into the data and found references to something called innocence extract. The term appeared repeatedly in the alien files, always connected to neural pattern harvesting and cognitive enhancement. A cold realization hit her. The Zaphirians weren't studying human children to understand them. They were studying them to exploit them. Sarah tried to research innocence extract using the colony's connection to the Galactic Information Network. Most references were blocked or encrypted, but she found enough fragments to piece together a horrifying picture. Innocence extract was a cognitive enhancement drug derived from the neural patterns of developing minds. It was highly illegal in most civilized systems, But that didn't stop the black market trade. The drug was incredibly valuable because it could only be created from the brain patterns of young, intelligent beings during specific developmental stages. Users reported enhanced mental clarity, improved memory, and extended lifespans. The effects were temporary, creating a constant demand for fresh neural data. Sarah's hands shook as she realized what this meant. The Zaphirians weren't planning to physically harm the children. They were stealing something far more precious: the unique patterns that made young human minds so creative and adaptable. And based on her readings, the scanning process itself could cause permanent damage to developing brains. She needed help, but who could she trust? Morrison was too eager to please their alien guests, and most of the other colonists saw the Zaphirians as saviors bringing advanced technology. Sarah decided to reach out to her old colleague, Dr. Elena Vasquez, who worked on the mining station orbiting New Geneva. Elena listened to Sarah's findings during a private video call. Her face grew grim as Sarah explained the neural scanning data and the references to innocence extract. "Sarah, this is beyond horrible," Elena said. "But do you have enough proof? The Zaphirians could claim their scans are harmless research, and who's going to contradict them?" "I need to get more evidence," Sarah replied. "But I also need to get word out to other human colonies. If they're doing this here, they're probably doing it everywhere." Elena was quiet for a moment. "There's someone you should talk to. Marcus Webb runs supply shipments between the outer colonies. He's not part of the official coalition trade networks, and he doesn't trust aliens much. If anyone can help spread the word quietly, it's him." Sarah arranged to meet Webb at the colony's main docking bay. He was a large, weathered man in his 50s, who looked like he'd seen too much of the galaxy's dark side. His ship, the Free Spirit, was an old Earth vessel that had been heavily modified with salvaged alien technology. "Dr. Chen," Webb said as they walked through his cargo hold, "Elena says you've got information about our new Zaphirian friends that I need to hear." Sarah showed him everything she'd discovered. Webb's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "I knew something was wrong," he finally said. "I've been to 6 other colonies in the past month, and the Zaphirians have research programs at all of them. Always focused on the kids, always with the same story about cultural exchange. Can you help get this information to other colonies?" Sarah asked. Webb nodded grimly. "I can do better than that. There's a network of independent traders and colonists who've been sharing information about suspicious alien activities. We've been watching the Zaphirians for months, but we didn't have proof of what they were really doing." He led Sarah to his ship's communication center. "There's something else you need to know. 3 days ago, the Zaphirians started a new phase of their program. They're requesting that certain children be transferred to their advanced education facilities off-world." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Which children?" "The brightest ones. The most creative and intelligent kids in each colony. They're calling it a special honors program, and most parents are thrilled their children were selected." Sarah realized the Zaphirians were escalating their operation. They were no longer content with just scanning children. They wanted direct access to harvest neural patterns more efficiently. Over the next few days, Sarah and Webb worked together to gather more evidence. They discovered that several Coalition Council members had financial ties to companies that produced cognitive enhancement drugs. The conspiracy went much deeper than just the Zaphirians. Sarah used her position as colony scientist to delay the transfer of New Geneva's selected children. She claimed they needed additional medical clearances before leaving the colony. It bought them time, but not much. Meanwhile, Webb sent encrypted messages to his network of contacts throughout human space. The response was immediate and angry. Parents on other colonies reported that their children had already been taken to Zaphirian facilities. Some had returned changed, less creative, less energetic, as if something vital had been drained from them. The evidence was overwhelming, but Sarah knew it wouldn't be enough to stop the Zaphirians through official channels. The Coalition Council was either corrupt or too afraid of the powerful alien empire to take action. Earth's government was still too dependent on Coalition technology to risk confrontation. On her 7th night of investigation, Sarah made a discovery that chilled her to the bone. Hidden in the deepest layers of the Zaphirian data files, she found production schedules for innocence extract. The numbers were staggering. They planned to process the neural patterns of thousands of human children over the next year. But the most horrifying detail was in the medical notes. The extraction process would leave the children alive but permanently damaged. Their creativity, curiosity, and emotional depth would be gone forever, replaced by empty compliance and dulled intelligence. Sarah realized she was looking at a plan for the systematic destruction of an entire generation of human children. The Zaphirians saw young humans not as sentient beings but as resources to be harvested. She called Webb immediately. "We can't wait for official help," she told him. "They're planning to start full extraction procedures within days. If we don't act now, hundreds of children will be permanently damaged." Webb's voice was grim but determined. "Then we stop waiting for permission. I'll contact my people. It's time to show these aliens what happens when someone threatens human children." As Sarah ended the call, she looked out her window at the children playing in the colony's central plaza. Their laughter and energy filled the evening air, a sound that the Zaphirians wanted to steal forever. But they had made a crucial mistake. They thought humans were weak and divided, easy targets for exploitation. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Marcus Webb's ship became the center of a growing storm. Within hours of Sarah's call, encrypted messages flooded in from human colonies across 3 sectors. The network of independent traders, miners, and colonists that Webb belonged to was far larger than Sarah had imagined. "We've got confirmation from 18 colonies," Webb told Sarah as they stood in his ship's communication center. "The Zaphirians have the same setup everywhere. Always the same story about cultural exchange, always targeting the brightest kids." Sarah watched the incoming reports with growing horror. Parents from distant worlds described children who had returned from Zaphirian educational programs as shadows of their former selves. Bright, creative kids who used to ask endless questions now sat quietly, showing no interest in anything around them. "How many children have they already processed?" Sarah asked. Webb's face was grim. "Based on these reports, at least 300, and that's just what we know about." The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Webb opened it to reveal the worried face of Captain Maria Santos, commander of the mining station Prometheus. "Marcus, we've got a problem," Santos said. "The Zaphirians just demanded that we hand over 12 children for their advanced program. When I tried to delay, they brought in coalition enforcement ships. They're threatening to cut off all trade and support if we don't comply." Webb cursed under his breath. "They're moving faster than we expected. How long do you have?" "They want the children transferred within 48 hours, Santos replied. "But Marcus, there's something else. My communications officer intercepted part of a Zaphirian transmission. They mentioned something about final harvest procedures and maximum extraction efficiency." Sarah felt sick. The aliens weren't planning to just scan the children anymore. They were preparing to extract everything valuable from their young minds regardless of the damage it would cause. After ending the call, Webb turned to his senior crew members. "Send word to all our contacts. Emergency protocols are now in effect. We're going to protect these children whatever it takes." Over the next 12 hours, the Human Resistance Network came together with a speed that surprised even Webb. Former military officers who had retired to the colonies offered their expertise. Mining crews volunteered their ships and equipment. Families who had lost children to the Zaphirians demanded action. Sarah worked tirelessly to coordinate information sharing between the colonies. Her scientific background proved invaluable in understanding the technical aspects of the Zaphirian equipment. She discovered that their scanning device is all connected to a central processing station, where the stolen neural patterns were converted into innocence extract. "If we can find their main facility, we can stop the entire operation," Sarah explained to Webb and his team. "But it won't be easy. These facilities are heavily guarded and located in neutral space." Webb smiled grimly. "Leave that to us. We've been operating in neutral space for years. The Zaphirians might have better technology, but they don't know how humans fight when they're desperate." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Tommy Chen, Sarah's 8-year-old nephew, had been selected for the Zaphirian program on New Geneva. When Sarah explained why he couldn't go, Tommy surprised her with his response. "Aunt Sarah, I've been watching the tall aliens," he said. "They don't just talk to each other with those translator things. They use hand signals too when they think nobody's looking." Tommy had been secretly observing the Zaphirians during their visits to his school. His child's curiosity had led him to notice details that adults missed. The hand signals he described matched a tactical communication system, that Webb recognized from his military days. "The kid's right," Webb said after reviewing Tommy's observations. "They're using military coordination protocols. This isn't just a research operation. It's a systematic assault." Using Tommy's information, Sarah and Webb pieced together the Zaphirians' operational structure. The aliens had divided human space into sectors, with processing facilities strategically placed to handle children from multiple colonies. The main facility appeared to be located in the Kepler Nebula, a region of space that officially belonged to no government. Meanwhile, the situation was deteriorating rapidly across human colonies. The Zaphirians were becoming more aggressive in their demands, using coalition authority to force compliance. Parents who tried to hide their children faced threats of exile or imprisonment. On the Aurora colony, Dr. Jennifer Walsh made a desperate choice. Rather than hand over her daughter to the aliens, she transmitted all her research data to Webb's network and then destroyed the Zaphirian scanning equipment in her colony's school. Coalition forces arrested her within hours, but her act of defiance inspired others. Similar acts of resistance began occurring throughout human space. Parents formed secret groups to hide their children. Scientists sabotaged alien equipment. Traders like Webb started smuggling families away from colonies where the Zaphirian presence was strongest. The aliens responded with increasing force. They brought in more ships, imposed strict monitoring of all communications, and began conducting house-to-house searches for selected children. What had started as a quiet operation was becoming an open confrontation. Sarah realized that scattered resistance wouldn't be enough. The Zaphirians had the backing of the Coalition Council and superior military technology. Humanity needed a coordinated response that would strike at the heart of their operation. "We need to rescue the children who've already been taken," she told Webb during a strategy meeting. "If we can get them back and document what was done to them, we'll have proof that even the Coalition Council can't ignore." Webb nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. But it means attacking their main processing facility. That's not going to be a simple rescue mission." "Do we have enough ships?" Sarah asked. "Ships, yes, but most of our people are miners and traders, not soldiers. Going up against a heavily defended military facility is suicide." The answer came from Captain Santos on Prometheus. "Marcus, I've been talking to other station commanders. We're not just miners and traders anymore. We're parents and grandparents whose children are being threatened. That makes us something much more dangerous." Over the next day, a plan took shape. It was risky and relied heavily on the element of surprise, but it was their only chance to stop the Zaphirians before more children were permanently damaged. Webb would lead a strike force of volunteer ships to the main processing facility in the Kepler Nebula. Their goal wasn't to destroy the facility. They didn't have enough firepower for that. Instead, they would rescue as many children as possible and gather irrefutable evidence of what the Zaphirians were doing. Meanwhile, Sarah would coordinate with resistance cells throughout human space. When Webb's team made their move, every human colony would simultaneously broadcast the evidence of Zaphirian crimes to the entire galactic community. The night before the operation, Sarah stood on New Geneva's observation deck looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, human children were trapped in alien facilities, having their minds slowly drained away. Tomorrow, humanity would show the galaxy what happened when someone threatened their young. Tommy joined her at the window. "Are you scared, Aunt Sarah?" Sarah knelt down to his level. "Yes, I am. But sometimes being scared is what gives us the courage to do what's right. The tall aliens think humans are weak," Tommy said. "They're going to learn they were wrong, aren't they?" Sarah smiled at her nephew's wisdom. "Yes, Tommy. They're going to learn that the worst mistake you can make in this galaxy is threatening a human child." As dawn approached, Webb's ships prepared to launch. The Free Spirit led a fleet of converted cargo vessels, mining ships and civilian transports toward the Kepler Nebula. They were vastly outgunned and completely unprepared for what they were about to face. But they were humans protecting their children, and that made them more dangerous than any alien could imagine. The Kepler Nebula stretched across space like a vast purple and gold cloud. Hidden within its swirling gases, the Zaphirian processing facility floated in the darkness. From the outside, it looked like a massive medical station, its clean white surfaces and gentle blue light suggesting a place of healing rather than horror. Marcus Webb studied the structure through his ship's sensors. The facility was larger than he'd expected, easily capable of housing thousands of subjects. Defensive platforms surrounded it, armed with weapons that could destroy his entire fleet with ease. 14 ships against a military installation, muttered Lieutenant Rodriguez, Webb's second-in-command. This is insane. Maybe, Webb replied. But sometimes insane is what works. The plan was complex but simple in its goal. Webb's ships would approach the facility using an old mining survey technique, disguising their signatures as background radiation. While the Zaphirians focused on the approaching fleet, Sarah's resistance cells would begin broadcasting their evidence throughout the galaxy. Sarah's voice crackled through the communication system from New Geneva. Marcus, we're ready on our end. The moment you make contact, every human colony will start transmitting. The whole galaxy will know what's happening. Understood, Webb replied. Beginning approach now. The human ships moved slowly through the nebula, their modified engines running almost silent. Webb had learned stealth techniques during his years as an independent trader, often needing to avoid both pirates and overly curious officials. Those skills were about to be put to their ultimate test. As they drew closer to the facility, Webb's communications officer picked up disturbing transmissions. The Zaphirians were discussing optimal extraction, rates and neural pattern degradation limits, and we're talking about human children, like they were industrial resources. Target acquired, reported the weapons officer. The facility's main computer core is located in the central section. If we can get to it, we should be able to access their complete records. Webb nodded. Remember, we're not here to destroy this place. We're here to rescue children and gather evidence. Every piece of proof we collect makes it harder for the Coalition to ignore what's happening. The attack began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time. Webb's ships emerged from the nebula's concealment and immediately launched everything they had at the defensive platforms. The improvised weapons, mining lasers, industrial cutters, and explosive charges designed for asteroid braking proved surprisingly effective against defenses designed to stop military ships. The Zaphirians were caught completely off guard. Their defensive systems were programmed to detect and counter sophisticated military attacks, not the chaotic assault of desperate civilians using mining equipment as weapons. Webb's ship, the Free Spirit, led the charge toward the facility's docking bays. Behind him, the other ships spread out to attack defensive positions and provide cover. The plan was working, but Webb knew they only had minutes before Zaphirian reinforcements arrived. The first boarding party reached the facility's outer hull and began cutting through the airlock doors. What they found inside shocked even hardened space miners. The corridors were lined with containment cells, each holding a human child connected to neural scanning equipment. Dear God, whispered Maria Santos as she led her team through the facility. There must be hundreds of them. The children were alive but unconscious, their minds being slowly drained by machines that converted their neural patterns into the precious innocence extract. Medical monitors showed that many had already suffered permanent damage to their creativity and emotional centers. While Santos's team worked to free the children, Webb pushed deeper into the facility toward the main computer core. The Zaphirians had activated internal security systems, but their defenses were designed to stop sophisticated infiltrators, not angry humans with jury-rigged equipment. Webb's team reached the computer center just as alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Zaphirian soldiers were converging on their position, but Webb's people had already begun downloading everything they could find. The data was beyond horrifying. The facility wasn't just processing children from human colonies. It was part of a galaxy-wide network that had been targeting young beings from dozens of species for decades. The humans were just the latest victims in an operation that had destroyed millions of young minds. Webb, we've got incoming ships, Rodriguez reported over the communication system. Zaphirian military vessels, at least 20 of them. How long until they reach us? Webb asked. 12 minutes, maybe less. Webb looked at the download progress. They had maybe half the data they needed, and Santos's team was still working to free the children. There wasn't enough time to do both. Maria, status report, Webb called. We've freed about 60 children, but there are at least 200 more. Marcus, some of these kids are in critical condition. The extraction process was damaging their brains in real time. Webb made the hardest decision of his life. Take the children you've freed and get to the ships. We'll hold position until the download is complete. What about the others? Santos asked. "We'll come back for them," Webb lied. He knew this was probably their only chance, but he couldn't leave any child behind if there was a possibility of saving them. The Zaphirian soldiers reached the computer center as Webb's download hit 70% completion. The battle was brief but brutal. The aliens had superior weapons and training, but the humans fought with the desperate fury of parents protecting their young. Webb's communications officer managed to transmit a burst of data back to Sarah before a Zaphirian energy weapon destroyed half their equipment. It wasn't everything they'd found, but it was enough. Meanwhile, Sarah was coordinating the massive information release from New Geneva. Every human colony simultaneously began broadcasting the evidence of Zaphirian crimes. The transmissions went out on every frequency in every language to every corner of the galaxy. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Coalition Council members who had been supporting the Zaphirians suddenly found themselves faced with undeniable evidence of mass atrocities. Species that had remained neutral were horrified by the scope of the neural harvesting operation. But the most powerful reaction came from humanity itself. The sight of their children connected to alien extraction machines triggered something primal in human consciousness. Parents on distant worlds watched the footage and felt their protective instincts ignite like never before. On New Geneva, Sarah watched the galactic communication networks overflow with responses. Some aliens expressed shock and horror at the Zaphirian crimes. Others called for immediate action to shut down the neural harvesting operation. But a few suggested that the humans were overreacting to what was just advanced medical research. Those few made a critical error. They underestimated what humans were capable of when their children were threatened. The response came not from Earth's government or the Coalition Council, but from ordinary human families throughout the galaxy. Parents organized boycotts of alien businesses. Miners refused to extract resources for species that supported the Zaphirians. Traders stopped carrying goods to worlds that had remained silent about the atrocities. But the most significant response came from the human colonies themselves. Within hours of the broadcast, colonial militias that had been disbanded after joining the coalition were reforming. Mining equipment was being converted into weapons. Civilian ships were being retrofitted for combat. The message was clear. Humanity would no longer rely on others to protect their children. Back in the Kepler Nebula, Webb's team managed to complete their download just as Zaphirian reinforcements arrived. The retreat was chaotic and costly. 3 human ships were destroyed, and Webb himself was badly wounded when a Zaphirian energy beam hit the Free Spirits Bridge. But they had succeeded in their primary mission. 67 children were freed from the facility, and the complete evidence of Zaphirian crimes was now spreading throughout the galaxy. The neural harvesting operation could no longer be hidden or denied. As the surviving human ships limped away from the facility, Webb looked back at the structure that still held hundreds of children. "We'll be back," he promised. "All of us. And next time, we won't be asking permission." The war for humanity's children had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn what humans were truly capable of when pushed too far. The footage from the Kepler Nebula facility spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every major news network, government database, and communication system carried the horrifying images of human children connected to neural extraction machines. The sight of young minds being systematically drained for alien enhancement drugs shattered any pretense that this was legitimate. Research. Sarah watched the galactic response from New Geneva's communication center. The Coalition Council had called an emergency session, but she knew their official response would come too late. Humanity was no longer waiting for permission to protect their children. The first sign of the coming storm came from the outer mining colonies. Captain Santos, now commanding a fleet of converted mining ships, reported that human facilities throughout the sector had gone dark to alien oversight. Colonial administrators were cutting ties with Coalition, monitoring systems and establishing independent communication networks. They're calling it the Great Disconnect, Santos told Sarah during a secure transmission. Every human colony is declaring independence from Coalition authority until this situation is resolved. But the real shock came when Earth's government released an official statement. President Martinez appeared before the United Nations and the galactic community with words that would reshape interstellar politics forever. The Coalition has failed in its most basic duty, protecting the innocent, Martinez declared. Until every human child is returned safely and those responsible are brought to justice, Earth withdraws from all coalition treaties and agreements. We will handle this matter ourselves. The announcement sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Earth was officially breaking away from the coalition that had brought them into the galactic community. It was an unprecedented move that many species thought would doom humanity to isolation and technological stagnation. They couldn't have been more wrong. Within days, offers of support began pouring in from unexpected sources. The Verdani, a peaceful species that had lost their own children to Zaphirian research programs centuries ago, quietly offered intelligence about additional processing facilities. The crystalline Nexari, who communicated through harmonic resonance, shared the locations of Zaphirian supply routes. Most importantly, several coalition member species began openly questioning their allegiance to an organization that had allowed such atrocities. The footage of human children being used as neural resources had triggered protective instincts in species that also valued their young. Marcus Webb, recovering from his injuries aboard a medical ship, coordinated the growing human resistance from his hospital bed. The loose network of traders and miners had transformed into something resembling a military force, with volunteers arriving daily from throughout human space. "We've got more ships than we know what to do with," Webb reported to Sarah. "Mining companies are donating entire fleets. Passenger transports are being converted to medical ships. Even luxury cruise liners are volunteering to carry refugees." The Zaphirians responded to the growing human movement by accelerating their operations. Intelligence reports suggested they were attempting to extract maximum value from their remaining facilities before humanity could organize a coordinated response. This proved to be their final mistake. Sarah received word that the Zaphirians had begun emergency processing of children at 12 facilities simultaneously. The neural extraction rates had been increased far beyond safe levels, threatening permanent brain damage or death for the young victims. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. Every available ship, from military vessels to converted cargo haulers, converged on the Zaphirian facilities. But this wasn't the chaotic attack on the Kepler facility. This was a coordinated assault by a species that had learned to fight as one when their children were threatened. The battle for the Aurora Station facility became legendary throughout human space. A fleet of mining ships approached the heavily defended installation, using tactics developed over centuries of human warfare. They didn't try to match the Zaphirians' superior technology. Instead, they used speed, unpredictability, and sheer numbers to overwhelm the defenders. The breakthrough came when Tommy Chen, Sarah's young nephew, suggested a tactic that military strategists had overlooked. Children's games, he explained, often involved multiple players coordinating against a single opponent. Humanity needed to stop thinking like individual ships and start acting like a swarm. The new approach proved devastatingly effective. Human ships attacked in coordinated waves, each group with a specific role. Some ships provided distraction while others rescued children. Engineering teams used mining equipment to disable defensive systems, while medical teams prepared to treat traumatized victims. Within hours, the Aurora Station was liberated and 200 children were free. The same pattern repeated at facility after facility across 3 sectors of space. The Zaphirians, who had dominated galactic politics through superior technology and military strength, found themselves unable to cope with humanity's adaptive tactics. But the most significant victory came in the political arena. The complete database from the Kepler facility had revealed the full scope of the Zaphirian operation. Species throughout the galaxy discovered that their own children had been victims of neural harvesting over the centuries. The Coalition Council finally acted, but their response was too little, too late. By the time they officially condemned the Zaphirian Empire and authorized military action, humanity had already liberated most of the processing facilities and rescued thousands of children. The Zaphirian leadership, faced with complete isolation and the collapse of their neural harvesting network, attempted to negotiate. They offered to return all remaining human children and pay compensation for damages. They even claimed they had been conducting legitimate medical research that had been misunderstood. Humanity's response was delivered by Webb himself, speaking from the bridge of the Free Spirit as it led a massive fleet toward the Zaphirian home system. "You had your chance to do the right thing," Webb broadcast on all frequencies. You chose to prey on children instead. Now you face the consequences. The final confrontation took place in orbit around Zephyr Prime, the Zaphirian homeworld. The alien empire's remaining fleet was impressive, but no match for the hundreds of human ships that had gathered for this moment. More importantly, the humans weren't alone. Dozens of other species had sent ships to support the liberation of the remaining children. The battle was brief. Faced with overwhelming force and complete galactic isolation, the Zaphirian military surrendered. The remaining processing facilities were shut down, and the last group of children was freed from neural extraction machines. Sarah was among the medical team that boarded the final facility. What she found there would haunt her forever. Hundreds of children from dozens of species, their minds damaged by months or years of neural harvesting. Many would never fully recover the creativity and emotional depth that had been stolen from them, but they were alive, and they were free. In the aftermath, the galaxy struggled to process what had happened. A species that many had considered weak and primitive had brought down one of the most powerful empires in known space. They had done it not through superior technology or military might, but through their willingness to unite when their children were threatened. The coalition attempted to welcome humanity back into their organization, offering new treaties and technological exchanges. Earth's response was polite but firm. Humanity would participate in galactic affairs but on their own terms. Never again would they trust others to protect what they valued most. Sarah returned to New Geneva to find her nephew Tommy playing in the colony's central plaza with a group of rescued children. They were different now, some quieter, some more cautious, but they were healing. Human families throughout the galaxy had opened their homes to children from other species who had been victims of the neural harvesting operation. "Aunt Sarah," Tommy called out when he saw her. "Are the tall aliens gone forever?" Sarah knelt down to hug her nephew. "The ones who hurt children are gone. But there are lots of good aliens out there too. The important thing is that we know how to protect ourselves now." Tommy nodded seriously. "And if someone tries to hurt kids again?" Sarah smiled, thinking of the hundreds of human ships that now patrolled the galaxy's trade routes, the early warning networks that connected every human colony, and the message that had been broadcast to every corner of known space. Touch human children, and face the consequences. Then the whole galaxy will remember what they learned about humans, Sarah told her nephew, that we're strongest when we're protecting the ones we love. Above them, the stars shone with the light of ships carrying that message to distant worlds. Humanity had taken its place in the galaxy not as subjects or supplicants, but as guardians of the innocent. The neural harvesting operations were finished forever, and every species in the galaxy now understood a fundamental truth about humans. They were not to be underestimated, especially when their children were threatened.